And the whole journey of infertility is completely uh, traumatic and even on its own. But when you add in this religious pressure of the whole point of life, basically, is to have an eternal family, I mean, you just feel like an epic failure.
Welcome to Life Happens and Then You Die, a podcast about life, growth, relationships, identity, and figuring things out in real time. I am your co host, Jessica, and joining me as always is.
Melissa.
Today, I am really excited because I have the opportunity to sit down with Melissa and talk about her experience with religious deconstruction.
Yeah.
Before I get started, I want to be clear that this episode isn't about attacking religion or telling anyone what they should or. So, Melissa, before we get started, is there anything that you want to share?
I'll just say that Jessica has prepared these questions for me. I have no idea what the questions are. I'm going into this blind, and I'm just excited to share my journey, I guess. So,
Beautiful. Okay, so let's start with what denomination did you grow up in?
okay, so I grew up, born and raised in the Mormon LDS Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, however you want to call it, church. And I was a member of the church. My parents were members of the church. All my siblings. Um, my mom's family and my dad's family are both first generation. So, like, my dad's parents were the ones who converted, and my mom's parents are the ones who converted. So I guess you would say my parents are both first generation, and I would be second generation Mormon.
So, what was religion like for you growing up? Was it more of a cultural or family expectation, or did it feel like something you actively chose and connected with personally?
Right. It was definitely not casual. We went to church every Sunday. It was just like the expected thing. Like every Sunday you go to church. I don't think there was ever a time in our lives where we slacked off and didn't go to church. It was a constant every week. And on top of that, in the LDS Church, there are also lots of weekly activities throughout the week for youth and adults and different things. And we were going to basically every activity you could, we were going to all of those.
It sounds like church was more than just a Sunday service. It was really woven into the rhythm of your week and your community. Would you say it felt like an everyday part of life with things like prayer at home, church activities, and social expectations?
N- n- yeah, yeah. We weren't always the best at praying before meals. We would, I mean, in the house, I would say we definitely tried. And I think, uh, I feel like other families were in the same boats. That most families were just doing the best that they could in terms of living the day to day, like praying as a family. Family home evening is a Monday family event that, church wide, they encourage you get together as a family, read scriptures, that sort of thing. That's something that we kind of like yo-yoed on. Like we would be really good at it, and then we would stop doing it for a long time, and then we would get really good at it again, and it was just hard to maintain sometimes with your busy lives. But for the most part, I would say we were pretty devout and pretty active in the church.
When you think about church life compared to school life or your broader community, did you ever feel like you had different versions of yourself in those spaces? Or did it feel like it was pretty connected?
I feel like I did, because the biggest thing here is I would go to church, and none of the people I went to church with went to my same school. At least all through elementary school, right? So all through elementary school, I felt like I was the only member of the church at the school. Didn't know any other people who went to the school besides my siblings who were members of the church. And then when I went to junior high, no, actually, no, before that. At some point, the church boundaries changed, meaning that the church is organized by different geographical boundaries, so that when it's kind of like a school district, right? So you have what's called a ward. A ward goes to a specific building for church every week, And just like certain kids would go to a certain elementary school based on where they live. So the ward boundaries changed, and we had some people in our ward that weren't there anymore, kids. Okay. We went from a really small Sunday school class for me to a class of like 11 kids, and it was two girls and nine boys. And I discovered for the first time that one of my schoolmates, who I had known all this time, was LDS. He was Mormon. I had no idea because I only saw him at church. I never saw him, or I only saw him in school, didn't see him at church, and then suddenly he was going to my church. So I had no idea. Those lives were just so separate from each other, just naturally. I don't really, I think it just all came down to the boundaries. But also, I grew up in California. And in California, where I grew up, there weren't as many members as there are in other areas of the states. There are very concentrated pockets of Mormons throughout different parts of the states, and I was not in one of those.
Okay, so speaking of the friends that you had at school, did they know that you went to church, or was that just something that you didn't really talk about that much?
I think they knew, but it wasn't something that I brought up a lot. It would just kind of be like, "Oh yeah, I have to go to church," or like, "Oh, I don't say certain words because, you don't take the Lord's name in vain," or, like when things come up, you are kind of raised and indoctrinated to stand up for the things that your church teaches. So when things would come up or somebody would be like, "Oh my God," I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, you can't say God." And they'd be like, "Why not?" And I'm like, "Because you're not supposed to." And like, I don't know any better. I just know what I've been taught. So I'm like trying to correct people because I don't know. This is just what I've been taught. So it came up every once in a while, but not very often.
Do you think that ever affected the kind of friendships you were able to build outside of church? Did you ever feel like you were judging others or that others were judging you based on those different beliefs and expectations?
I think maybe, but I don't know. I don't know if I don't know. That's really like hard. Like, who knows what life would have been like if I hadn't had that influence in my life, good or bad. Who knows? I will say, as the years went on and I moved into like junior high and high school, um, situations come up more often where people like reference Mormons. They know what Mormons are at this point. Or, I remember I think it was in high school, one of my friends, so I wasn't her friend, but my friend was friends with her, okay? She goes, "I heard you get electrocuted if you don't go to church." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I couldn't figure out what she was talking about. She's like, "I heard it on the news and my parents were talking about it and blah, 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 blah." Like, I don't even remember when I figured it out, but like, however long later, I realized she meant excommunicated. And I think she knew what she was doing. I think she knew it was excommunicated, but she wanted to like trip me up because like she she was that kind of a person. And so she was like, "You get electrocuted." And I'm like, "No, like what are you talking about?" I don't know.
That's actually kind of funny, but also a good example of how people can misunderstand religious terms from the outside. So, for anyone listening who may not be familiar with that practice, can you explain what excommunication means?
As communicated, basically what will happen is if you do something or behave a certain way that is against church teachings, then you possibly could go up and be in a council where they will discuss your membership and whether you are worthy to be a member. And if they decide that you are not worthy any longer, then you will be excommunicated or your membership is completely removed from you. You don't have a choice or a say. You're no longer a member anymore.
That makes sense. So, it's not just you stop going to church or you're no longer participating, it's a formal separation from the church. And depending on the person, that can carry a lot of emotional, spiritual, or even social weight. And I think that's important context because from the outside, people may hear a word like excommunication and not understand how serious or layered it can be for someone who grew up inside the faith tradition. So, shifting into a slightly different part of this conversation, when you were a kid, did you feel comfortable within the religion? Did church and the activities feel natural to you at the time, or was there ever a sense of disconnect?
So, this is an interesting question because as I started deconstructing, I realized that I wasn't like the hardest part about all of it was the authenticity of it all. Like I just felt like I wasn't being my authentic self anymore. And I, looking back, had to realize that all of this time I never was being my authentic self truly. Like I was being taught in certain things, and I would look at other people and look at them and say, well, they're not Mormon. God's not going to like punish them because they drink coffee. Like, I know I'm not supposed to drink coffee, but it's okay if you drink coffee because I know God's still going to save you because I don't believe God's not gonna. Like, all this time, I'm realizing, like, hello, you don't actually believe what the church is teaching you because you are living it for yourself. But when you see other people, you are not judging them by that same standard. You are like all these like good things, right? Like I'm like, like I would never tell somebody that they're not going to go to hell or they're not going to go to heaven just because they drink some coffee, but I have to hold myself to that standard. And I realized that's definitely a double standard. And why am I holding myself to it and not others? And I realized it was because I didn't truly believe it was indoctrinated, but I didn't actually believe any of it. But because I was going through the motions for so long, I didn't even realize I didn't believe it.
So, we'll get more into the deconstruction process a little later, but I do want to take a minute to ask
Mm-hmm.
how old were you when you started deconstructing?
33.
Oh, so it was a little bit later in your life then.
Yeah. I'm 38 for those who are joining for the first time. So we've been out of the church for 5 years. Yeah.
So, in the LDS faith tradition, there is a very strong emphasis on eternal families. As a child, what did that concept mean to you
Mm-hmm.
emotionally? Did it feel comforting? Did it feel like pressure? Or was it something you didn't fully understand at the time?
Yeah, for me, it was comforting. I saw it as like this beautiful thing that you can be with your family forever. And I still find that concept very comforting. But then it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier that, the church teaches that you are only sealed to you're only going to have that eternal family unit if you are sealed in the temple. And if you follow all the doctrines, so you don't lose your temple recommend, you don't get excommunicated, you have to like live the right way your whole life, or else you will not get to see your family again. In fact, it will be complete opposite. There's this punishment of, it's either eternal family or pretty much damnation. So, when I would look at other people, I would be like, don't worry about it. Like like I had all faith in God that he was not actually going to do that to people. So there again, I didn't actually believe it, but I was like, I'm gonna follow the teachings and I'm gonna get sealed in the temple and all these things. But I don't actually believe that other people aren't gonna see their families again. I believe everybody's gonna see their families again, regardless of their religion. And so just that realization of, okay, things aren't matching up here.
That's such an important distinction because it shows how faith can be part of your life long before you really had the chance to examine what parts of it feel true to your personality. So, growing up, were there any topics that felt strictly off limits because of the faith? Things you weren't supposed to question, talk about, or explore?
um, Not necessarily. My mom is a nurse, for example. She told me where babies come from when I was like 5 years old. She did not in a sexual way, just in a this is what happens. And I was like, okay, so when I want to have a baby, that's what I have to do. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I went to school the next day and I was like, babies come from vaginas. And I was telling everybody and the teacher got mad. So I mean, like, I don't feel like I was limited in terms of topics. Growing up, but I mean, we weren't allowed to curse and things like that. I just, because even sexual things get talked about in the church. And I actually learned about sexual things from church doctrine, whereas I probably wouldn't have learned so early what some of these things were if they hadn't brought it up at all. So, for example, they teach very frequently, once you turn like 12, I think, they will teach against pornography. So I didn't know as a 12-year-old what pornography was until the church told me what it was.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know they did that.
That is so bonkers. Like, you're you're causing the problem. You're causing curiosity. You're talking about, I would go to these things and I was only 12 years old. Oh, no making out and no petting. What the hell is petting? Can someone tell me? No, it's just, we're not going to talk about it, but you're not supposed to do it. So we can't talk about it, but we're not supposed to do it. So do I go home and Google it so I can figure out what it is? Not a good idea. So it's just like there's a lot with that I feel like a lot of youth in the church probably could have had a more stability in that part of life if they hadn't been taught so early these terms that they really wouldn't have learned otherwise.
Yeah, so it was more of a don't do this. But now that you've been
Yeah.
exposed to it and
Mm-hmm.
you've heard about it, you're going to be curious and want to explore it. Oh, and speaking of curiosity and explicit topics, there's something that I've heard about online, especially in conversations around LDS culture, something called soaking. And I'm
Yeah.
curious if you've heard about that.
Okay, so I've heard, I mean, obviously it's all over the internet. I When I was going to college, not a thing, never heard of it, okay? But I mean, the whole what I had heard of is that people in at BYU, Utah, drive down to Vegas, get married, get it annulled, and they would be able to have sex for the weekend or whatever. Those kind of things I've heard of, but soaking was a new thing to me after I was deconstructing because that I think is like, I want to say probably a Gen Z thing. It's not it's not a millennial thing.
Isn't that wild? But on that broader topic, though, did you ever experience or know of people finding workarounds for things that were taught not to do? Not necessarily that specific example, but in general, were there ways people tried to technically stay within the rules while still exploring things that were considered off limits?
No, but I will say I feel like it impacted me mentally, and the things that I like grew up feeling like was sexy to me because I was like, well, I'm not allowed to do this. So like, you kind of, when you think about these things, because you think about these things as a teenager, your hormones are crazy, right? You think about the workarounds in your head, even though you can't do it. So, because there's all these extra rules in place. Now, as I'm thinking about sex, as I'm growing up, I'm thinking about all of these ways that I could have sex without breaking like covenants and things like that.
When you think about things like covenants, worthiness, and all the rules around what was considered acceptable or off limits, did that ever create shame or guilt for you? And I don't just mean around sexual topics, I mean everyday things too, like coffee, language, clothing.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point, right? They make you feel guilty and yeah, so that you don't do it. But there's a lot of that experience with not just me, but with my husband too. So, like in his own experience. So, yeah.
So, did you and your husband deconstruct together?
I deconstructed first, and then I would be like, hey, maybe you should read about this. Maybe you should research about that.
Oh, okay. So, was there any conflict with you deconstructing before he did, or was he fairly supportive?
No, he was supportive. He just needed to approach it in his own way. Yeah.
Oh, growing up in the LDS Church, at least from my experience and from what I've seen and heard, there seemed to be a very specific idea of what a good woman was supposed to be. Did you experience that too? Were there expectations around femininity, modesty, marriage, motherhood, all of that stuff?
Um, there's a couple of things here. So the first one I will say is modesty is this big thing that they push, and that you know, there's like this famous quote that gets all over ex-Mormon TikTok of like, when you dress a certain way, you become pornography. Like if you're not being modest, then it's your fault, basically, and blaming women for men's actions, essentially. And there was just always this big push for being modest. Like this right here, never would have been able to leave the house with the tank top on. Just never, because shoulders are sexual. You can't show those. But now you can, because they've changed the garments and now you can show your shoulders. So that's the other thing. I mean, now I'm getting off on a tangent, but they say that the church is the church never changes, and it's the same today, yesterday, and tomorrow, or whatever. And I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It never has been. It never has been. The other thing is, okay, so we had modesty, and then remind me the question.
Simplified what it was to be a good woman in the church.
Oh, okay, so the other thing is weekly, starting at the age of like 8, you have a youth activity with people your age. When you're 8 to 12, it's just with the other girls. And a lot of the things you'll do is like crafts and silly things, okay? When you hit 12 to 18, now you have a little bit more maturity to that. Like you're learning how to cook and you're learning how to sew. Like the activities are like learn how to homemake, basically. And I remember an activity when I think I was 12. We made a temple time capsule. So the goal is to get married in the temple. And we made these time capsules where we wrote a letter to our future husband, and we cut up wedding magazines and put a picture of the dress that we wanted and the colors and the flowers and the everything, and we were supposed to open it when we were gonna get married. And I kept that thing and I opened it and gave the letter to my husband. Like since I was 12, just being completely groomed to just your purpose in life is to get married and to be a wife and to have kids. And like, I hope you have questions about family and children, because that whole part of the journey for me, so messed up.
I remember one moment that really stood out to me because I don't think I realized how young some of these gendered expectations could start. Missionaries were at my sister's house and they were talking with the kids. From what I remember, the boys were having more of a general religious discussion around
Mm-hmm.
the Ten Commandments. But my niece was taken aside separately, and the conversation with her was about how to be a good wife. And she was only 10 at the time. And I remember feeling really uncomfortable with that because at 10 years old, she shouldn't have to be thinking about marriage or what kind of wife she was supposed to become. She should have
Mm-hmm.
been learning about herself, about life, about being allowed to be a child.
Yeah. Generally speaking, they push marriage early to boys and girls. So girls are encouraged to attend a school, a church school if you can, and find a husband while you're at school. So you're in college, and I got married when I was 21. My husband was 24, and looking back, I'm like, we were babies. Like I hadn't lived my life. The other thing is, men typically will serve a 2-year mission. So they serve a mission when they turn 18. They go 2 years, so they come back when they're 20, and usually they're married by 21, 26. Their mission presidents typically will tell them, you know, you need to get married in the next 6 months after you go home. That's your goal.
Yeah, and I think they changed it recently, but women weren't able to go on missions when they turned 18, right? They had to wait.
They had to wait until they were 21, I think, and now they can go at I think they can go at 18 now. I think they at one point lowered it to 19. I think since then they've lowered it to 18. I'm not sure.
And that feels so young.
Yeah. Well, and they're doing all of this stuff in your formidable years, right? So, they're keeping you from living life and getting you married early. You have kids, early, and now you're kind of stuck too. And then you rely on your husband, you rely on the church.
So, do you feel men and women were treated
Yeah,
equally in church?
not at all. Not at all. Not even a little bit.
Speaking of relationships, did romance feel like something you were supposed to discover naturally? Like finding someone you genuinely loved and connected with? Or did it feel more like there was a spiritual or cultural assignment attached to it? Like your goal was to find a husband, get married, and start a family as soon as possible?
No, for me personally, no. Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like in a lot of ways I was keeping myself separated from church and spiritual things without realizing. Like I feel like I compartmentalized a lot of things without realizing it, and so I think that's part of the reason why. And maybe this is true for other people too. I don't know, but I feel like a lot of people. Well, I don't know. I don't want to like make assumptions. There are people who, when they deconstruct, they split up with their spouse, and I was not in that situation. I married my best friend, and he's my partner, and I picked him, and I will always continue to pick him, and we support each other, and I just feel so lucky that I could deconstruct and still have my partner.
Oh, so let's talk about how you met your husband.
Well, I would not have met my husband if I hadn't gone to a church school, because we both went to a church school. So that directly impacted that. But other than that, I met my husband on a blind date. I think I was 20. So we between the time we met and the time we got married, it was a year.
Oh, so did you feel pressured to get married within a year, or was that just something that you took at your own pace?
So I don't feel like the church pressures you to get married. They don't have to do that because you can't have sex until you get married. So there's this added element of, well, I'm ready for the next step in my relationship, and I can't do that unless I get married. And I think that's part of the reason why people get married so young, because otherwise, in a normal cultural relationship, you take that next step. You move in together. You see if you're compatible in that way. You know, it is such a shame that they demonize all of this because it's such an important part of your relationship. And there are so many people out there who get married. They've done everything right. They get married in the temple, and then it turns out their spouse is not who they thought they were.
Yeah, and I think that's where taking time to really understand compatibility becomes so important. Because in any relationship, there are certain things you may not fully know until you've had enough time and life experience together to see how you communicate, handle
Mm-hmm.
conflict, make decisions, and navigate real life stress. And marriage is such a major life decision. It's emotional,
Yeah.
spiritual, legal. I mean, you're bringing in the government. So when there's pressure to move quickly, especially before people can have had time to really explore compatibility, that can create some challenges. That said, I'm really glad for the two of you that
Yeah.
compatibility
Me
was
too.
there and it worked out. So you dated for about a
Mm-hmm.
year before getting married. During that time, did you follow the expectations
Mm-hmm.
about not having sex or living together before marriage? Was there a lot of temptation?
Um, Not necessarily, because we were long distance.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We were on, so they say, off track. So we were on different semesters. So there's a 3 semester thing that they do, and so I was fall spring or something like that, and he was spring summer. So we weren't always at school at the same time, and we lived in different states, so we were long distance.
So, how much time did you actually spend together before you got married?
uh, Probably like anywhere between 3 and 6 months, and the rest of it, so like at least half of it, was long distance.
Oh, okay. So did you have any boyfriends before you met your husband?
Yes, I had two other boyfriends. So my first boyfriend was in high school, and I started dating him because we were kind of set up by my friend to go to prom together, and we decided to kind of date a little bit beforehand to kind of get to know each other before we went to prom. And we ended up becoming an item, and we dated for probably maybe a year until we were about to graduate, and I was about to, go to college and all these things, and he was ready to take the relationship to the next level, and I had to put him down and say, hey, I'm not doing that until I'm married. So we broke up because of that.
Okay, so there was some pressure. Do you think your relationship with sexuality would have been different if you hadn't had those religious beliefs and expectations around sex before marriage?
Oh, if I didn't have that belief, I would have lost my virginity at 18, for sure. But I don't know. From there, it's hard to imagine, like, because if I didn't have that, then maybe I wouldn't have had the belief that I needed to get married so young. And, it would have completely, I probably never would have met Paul, all these things. So it's hard to think about life that way. And, oh, well, what if? Because it's like, well, we can't really change anything. All we can do is go forward.
Oh, yeah, I think you could drive yourself crazy if you stopped to think about all the what ifs.
Yeah. And then I had one other boyfriend in my freshman year of college. He was also a freshman. This was before his mission, and so we had 2 semesters, I think, together, and then he left for his mission, and basically we were to this point where it was like, I'm either waiting for you for 2 years, you're coming back and we're getting married, or um, like I'm moving on. And he did not want to say, he didn't want to ask me to wait. So he didn't. And then I would try to write him and get basically nothing back. So I moved on and I met Paul. And then he emailed me, which he was not supposed to do, not supposed to email. And he was like, what's going on? Because I think he heard somehow. And I was like, I'm getting married. And he was like, okay.
And isn't that interesting? Brandon, but did your husband go on a mission?
He did. However, he was very sick on his mission and got sent home early, which has caused him a lot of trauma. And that's his story to tell. But basically, there's a lot of shame behind that, that even if you went home for the right reasons, you went home early. That's something that jeopardizes for a lot of men in the church your potential to get married, because you're taught you can only marry a return missionary.
Oh, see, I wasn't aware of that. But speaking of relationship dynamics, were you guys raised to believe that the man was the head of the household? Like, was that the kind of dynamic that your relationship started with?
um so I feel like Paul and I were both raised, I mean, like, our generation, the millennial generation, are kind of, even though we're in the church, a lot of us, I think, we're still kind of raised to have this open perspective about a lot of things. And so I feel like there's so much deconstruction happening with people, millennials, even Gen Z in the church right now. And I feel like the way the world has evolved, and, I don't know. I don't know if I'm making any sense. My mom worked out of the house. My dad worked. I didn't grow up with a typical Mormon family, in that the typical Mormon family, the mom stays home. She just takes care of the kids. My mom worked. I aspired to have a career. Paul's mom worked. She ran her own daycare. So we both had that perspective of, like, there's some equality there. And when we went into marriage, we knew we wanted to continue that equality. There was never a like, you're better than me, I'm over you, like you're here and I'm here and God's here. It was very mutual the whole time.
Okay, so you had more of a partnership then. So with your beliefs, were you guys pretty similar in the strengths of those beliefs and agreeable with the different rules and expectations?
It was pretty amicable. Yeah. I don't, and I feel like too, this is probably going to sound weird, but because he didn't serve a full-time mission and didn't spend like a full 2 years like studying the scriptures and stuff, that was less intimidating to me. I feel like men sometimes hold that over women's heads, that I'm the authority of the spirituality in this house because I studied this for 2 years and I know better than you, kind of a thing. So, and and we're generalizing a lot here, guys. Like, not every couple is like that. A lot of couples are like me and Paul, where it's just like, there's a lot of equality and a lot of partnership going on, and things are good. So,
I think people can experience and apply religion very differently depending on their personality, their family dynamics, and the environment they're in. So, even with the
hmm
same faith tradition, one person may experience certain teachings as comforting or grounding, while the other person may experience them as more controlling or restrictive, especially if those teachings are being interpreted through someone with a stronger need for authority or control.
hmm
Speaking of getting married in the temple, what was that experience like for you? Were you excited to have a temple wedding? Did you feel it was meaningful and personal to you, or did it feel more like this is what we do?
yeah, I was excited to get married. I was not excited to. Um, I mean, I don't get to wear the dress I want to wear. I mean, like, I picked out my dress, but I don't. I mean, there's even when you have a short sleeve, they put additional sleeves on you. You have additional garments that you have to wear. So when you're getting married, you're not getting married in your wedding dress. You're getting married with your wedding dress covered with a bunch of stuff over the top. And I mean, I it's just I do regret it. I mean, I'm not regret because I'm glad that I married Paul, but I do feel like I missed out on the experience that I actually wanted. Yeah. I would have, I mean, but looking back, I just sad for the part of me that didn't get to wear the kind of dress that I really would have liked to wear, or had the party that I would have liked to have. Yeah, it was a big milestone to get married, and you have to do it their way.
Did you have any family members or friends that couldn't go to the wedding because they didn't follow the faith?
Yes, my husband's older sister left the church when she was in college, and so she was not able to go inside, and her husband were not able to go inside.
So, in the question that came up that triggered this entire interview is I heard that, and I thought it was when you got married, that you were given a name that you are not allowed to tell anyone.
Well, it's not when you get married, actually. So before you get married, you do temple endowments. The Basically, you will get your endowments at certain times in your life. There's certain triggers here. So the first trigger would be going on a mission. So whether you're a man or a woman, if you're going on a mission, you get your endowments. They say get your endowments taken out is what they call it. I don't know why. Yeah, so you get your endowments, and then you go on your mission. Uh, from there, that's basically the route that, because all men are supposed to serve a mission, that's the route that all the men take. Because not every woman serves a mission, from there, you take your endowments out when you get married. And if you don't get married, then you can get special permission at a certain age. Basically, they're telling you, like, you've aged out. You can have your endowments. Like, if I wasn't married at 38, they'd be like, okay, sweetie, you can go do it because we don't want to hold you back. But really, it's like, but when you do the endowments, there's actually a couple different ceremonies. And one of them is you get a new name. This is your spiritual name. And as I remember, the women are to, when they go to heaven, and your husband is there, he is supposed to call you by this name and accept you into heaven. And you tell your husband when you get married what your name is, and he never tells you what his name is.
What happens if the wife dies first? I mean, what then?
You just wait, I guess. I don't know. You're looking down, die, motherfucker, get up here. So men can be sealed to multiple women, but women cannot be sealed to multiple men. So if you're a man and your wife dies and you have a temple marriage, you can remarry in the temple as long as that woman doesn't already have a temple marriage. So basically, an unmarried woman, if he marries an unmarried woman, basically, he can have both women in
Okay, that actually makes me think of something I didn't think about until just now, but polygamy, was that part of Mormonism?
heaven. Yes, polygamy was part of early Mormonism until it was outlawed. And they essentially claimed that God didn't want them to practice Mormonism on earth anymore, or not Mormonism, polygamy, and that it will be practiced in the heavens, basically. And basically, if I remember correctly, and you'll have to fact check me on this, but I think this and black people having the priesthood were both also um, tax government issues too. That if they didn't comply, that they were going to get taxed. So they complied.
Oh, so as the woman, you're just kind of stuck with it. But that does make me wonder what happens if your husband is excommunicated? Do you know?
So I think what happens when your husband, well, I don't know if it breaks the eternal seal. I can't remember. I think it might. I don't know for sure. Yeah.
Oh, so squirrel moment
Mm-hmm.
circling back to when you were talking about getting married. You mentioned garments, and I'm curious what age do you start wearing garments?
Um, so the official garments, if you don't know, Jess is talking about there is a specific underwear that you have to wear, and you do that after you take out your endowment. So then you are given the garment to wear at all times, and you're not supposed to alter it. And from what I can tell, people don't uh, treat this covenant the way that I was told to treat it. A lot of people don't wear garments anymore, as far as I can tell. A lot of people still do. But like, I mean, if you look at that TV show, what is it? The Mormon Wives, the Mormon Wives, whatever. Hardly any of them wear garments. I think maybe they do occasionally when they want to, but they don't do it all the time. Um, so a lot of doctrine these days gets treated differently uh, because people feel like they have a choice. Where as I was raised, until you don't have a choice, this is what we do.
Oh, so do you think it's more common now, like deviation from things because they keep updating and changing the rules?
I don't. I don't really know. I also feel like it's also kind of like this Utah melting pot thing, that maybe this some of these things only happen in Utah, where there's a lot of Mormons, and it kind of, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. I can't speak for everyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's completely understandable. And I want to circle back. I have one more question before we get into the actual deconstruction. But what kind of pressure did you feel to start a family after you got married?
I didn't feel pressure to get pregnant right away. In fact, I think, if I remember correctly, I feel like my parents kind of encouraged like to not do that. I think I still had another year left in college, and I think when my husband asked my dad for my hand, the rule was, uh, no kids until you finish college, like you get your degree. My sister didn't follow that rule. She had her first kid before she finished, and then, or she didn't go back. She didn't finish. She didn't get her degree. So that was important to my parents, that I get my degree before starting a family. So I did get my degree, and then a few years after that, I think, is when we started to start trying to have a kid. At that point, we both had graduated. It took Paul a lot longer to graduate because he didn't know what his major was going to be for a while, so it took him longer to get there. Um, but at that point, we had settled. We bought a house. We were ready at that point. Um, so I didn't feel like I felt pressure to have children early. Uh, I felt like there were some good boundaries from my parents, that like, hey, like, you get your education first, and you, like, they have a pretty level head that way. But after that, we struggled to get pregnant. We tried for like 7 years. Oh, 6, 7. We tried for a long time, and we ended up doing infertility treatments, and we did get pregnant, and we lost the baby halfway through the pregnancy. And the whole journey of infertility is completely traumatic, and even on its own. But when you add in this religious pressure of the whole point of life, basically, is to have an eternal family, I mean, you just feel like an epic failure. And going to church, and maybe this is why, I was also getting to this point religiously, going to church was so hard when I was going through infertility, because all around me are all of these people with their beautiful families, and I don't have one. All we sing about, every hymn, is families can be together, and all of these things about family, 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 which are beautiful things, but I don't have one of those. And I might never have one of those. So what happens to me? Like, where's my family? Where, like, people, lessons upon lessons and lessons that are applied only behind this perspective of family. So you go to a lesson, and a common question would be, how do we teach this to our children? Well, I don't know, because I don't fucking have any. It made me so angry to go to church every Sunday, and the only perspective was parental family perspective. There was no self-application to any of it. It was always, how do we teach our kids? How do we do this for our family? Never for ourselves. And that drove me crazy.
That would be really difficult, especially being in a community and environment where marriage and children are so strongly emphasized. And when you've already gone through the experience of trying and it didn't happen, I can imagine it would be painful to be consistently surrounded by messaging that treats motherhood as a central part of a woman's purpose. And there's something I've heard before, and I think you already know this, but when we worked together, someone in that environment once expressed disappointment to me that you and your husband didn't try harder to have kids and instead chose to focus on hobbies and other parts of your life. And I remember being really taken aback by that because it felt like such a narrow way to view someone's life. To me, that kind of thinking removes so much of the person's humanity. It reduces a deeply personal and often painful experience into a judgment about whether someone followed the right path, instead of recognizing that people are complex and that their lives still have meaning, value, and fullness outside of parenthood.
Yeah, it's taking away my self-worth, that I'm not worthy of anything, basically, because I don't have kids. That, I can't, it's shameful that I have hobbies over having kids. Well, I can't have kids. I tried. My child died. And I think that's also something that's often forgotten. Like, they just assume they didn't try hard enough. My kid is in the ground. I don't have the privilege of raising my son. And you have the audacity to say that I didn't try hard enough. I spent 10 grand trying hard. I don't have another 10 grand. I don't have 40, 60 grand to adopt. I don't have any more left in me to go through more trauma of losing more kids, whether through death or through failed adoptions. I'm done. I have to put myself first. And I am happy. I am an auntie and I freaking love being an auntie. And I hate that people say, like you don't know true love until you have a child. Are you kidding me? I would do anything for my nieces and nephews. Anything. I worry about them constantly. I have so much PTSD from the death of my son that I worry about my nieces and nephews dying. It's like some intrusive thoughts of just, if we go swimming, what if something happens? Like, I like, there's so much trauma there, and like, people don't understand that people make choices that are best for them, and you have no say in my choices.
And thank you for sharing that. I know that is incredibly personal, and I don't want to move past it too quickly because that matters. There is such a difference between choosing not to have children and surviving the reality of not being able to have the life you tried so hard to build. And either way, no one owes anyone an explanation for the choices they make around their own body, grief, family, or future. I think what you said is really important because people often look at someone's life from the outside and create a story that is simple enough for them to judge. But they don't see the loss, the cost, the trauma, the love, or the healing that had to happen behind that decision. And being an aunt, having hobbies, building a life that brings you peace, none of that is a consolation prize. That is still full and meaningful life. And before we get into the deconstruction itself, is there anything you want to reflect on from the conversation we've had so far?
I will just say that we've talked a lot about cultural things, and cultural things can be very different to each individual, and how you have been impacted by it, how you perceive it, how you identify it. And doctrinal things are very different. And I will say, when I deconstructed, it was more on the doctrinal side. However, there were cultural things in the church that I didn't like. I feel like a lot of people aren't their authentic selves, even if they don't realize it, because they're suppressing all these things and following all these rules. But mostly, I would say my they call it your shelf. I have a broken shelf. Basically, is this is a common terminology in deconstructing. It's you have a question, you're not sure about something, and you put it on your shelf, and you go, I'll take care of that later. I'm not sure about this. I don't believe this, or I have questions about this. I'm going to put it on my shelf. And then eventually the shelf breaks.
All right, we are actually going to wrap up this episode before we get into the deconstruction. The second part is out now, so you can go straight into it. But we ended up talking quite a bit, so I wanted to break this into two sections. But thank you for spending time with us to go through Melissa's deconstruction. It was a fun interview for me, and I'm glad that we were able to do it. If you like the podcast, please like, share, comment, follow, do all the fun things, and jump into part two.